You're listening to the Diginauts on the Good Talk Podcast Network.
This week on the Diginauts, we'll talk about the new app from the creators of Vine. What's their next project?
Even Pokemon Go helped the Russians.
We'll tell you where cops will soon be riding hover bikes. All this and more on the Diginauts. Society, the future, morality, disruption, policy, humanity, innovation, technology, morality, the future, law, humanity, society.
It's like, is that cannibalism? What is that?
Diginauts.
Hello, mortals. It's the Diginauts. How are you? Hey, Eric. How's it going?
It's going well.
That is fantastic. Ladies and gentlemen listening to us today is the first show where we're going to try out a bit of a new format. I think this is kind of cool. As with all things digital, you learn as you go and you pivot, and we decided to make some format changes that essentially amount to a teeny tiny pivot for us. We have always been starting the podcast with top of mind, sort of the top story in the digital and society space. And how do we describe it, Eric? It's always hard to kind of lock in on that story that's sort of, this isn't...
Yeah, too elusive.
Too elusive, right. It's not like the evening news, right? Where it's like, hey, here's the top story happening in the world today, which is kind of how we were trying to treat it. And that doesn't really speak to what we do and the lens that we're approaching these stories through. So what we decided to do is take our segment Most Disruptive. And you may have seen us do that a couple of times, heard us do that a couple of times, I suppose. There's nothing to see. You may have heard us do a couple of times. We attempted to do Most Disruptive, and we planned to do that at the end of each month as the sort of like, out of all the stories surrounding technology and science and society, which in that month were the stories that had the greatest overall impact, essentially on, I don't know, the future of humanity. Not to put too melodramatic a tone on it. Right? But basically, like, out of everything that happened that month, what is going to be the thing that changes us as a species? Nah, I just even got more melodramatic.
Wow.
But what's delightful about the format change to me is we're going to take that idea of the most disruptive story and we're going to apply it on the weekly level. So what happened this week that is the thing that's going to have the biggest impact on humanity and technology and our future?
Setting the bar high.
Yeah, right? Well, but it's delightful that we are looking at the macro, but by doing it every week, it is necessarily in the micro as well. So it's what were this week's headlines, but out of all those headlines, what are the things? It's not sort of the biggest story that is coming through technology this week. You can find that from other sources. What we're going to bring you is the one that we think is, going to have a long-term, the things that might show up in the history books, so to speak. So did you find it easy to lock in on your thing that's going to have the most impact on humanity for the week?
Again, I think you're setting the bar pretty high. Choices.
I'm going to keep describing it that way, and I'm going to get more and more grandiose as I go. Which story did you pick? Eric, as you examined the future of our species and those inflection points that most determined which path we would follow.
Oh, God. I'd say one is maybe approaching that level. The other one, not so much. But I'm gonna talk. I'll talk to both.
Okay, you had a couple. I also had kind of, here's my story, and then there's some sort of runners up.
Nice. Yeah, so the first one, if you remember there was an app called Vine, and eventually Twitter bought it, and eventually Twitter killed it. Exactly. Big mistake, especially with the whole focus on video and social and whatnot. But rest assured, the founders of Vine did not give up. They went off and regrouped and have been working literally ever since then on a variety of ideas, one of which has recently started to explode. And it literally started exploding today, and I played around with it.
I hope it didn't literally start to explode.
Not quite. Explode in terms of taking off, more and more people using it. So they realized, and they have expertise in video, they have expertise in social, and they realized people love trivia. So they combined like live video. So imagine like they hired a comedian. I didn't recognize him, but then I looked him up and he is a comedian. And they green screened it with like funky like Instagram filter type backgrounds, and there's whatchamacallit, geometric shapes floating all around. There's snazzy music and whatnot. And literally there's a series of like 12 questions of which you have 3 seconds to answer. If you get any one of the questions wrong, you can still watch and you can comment, but you can't eventually win a portion of the like $150 prize.
Okay.
So literally, they do it. They only do it a couple times a day. I did it earlier today at 6 p.m. California time, and they had over 4,500 people like coming to the app at 6 p.m. to participate, like instantly. So I think it's really smart. I think Twitter is really regretting kind of killing Vine and basically pushing those founders out.
Nice. Future of humanity, maybe not.
That's what I'm saying. But here's my point, right? Like, video's huge, social's huge, and no one, and up until these guys, was ever considering or really doing like a live trivia game show.
Right.
Right? Like, why hasn't anyone done that? They realized it, and I think they're going to continue to crush it. Because literally, like, the prize is a joke, $150, but they had over 4,500 people trying to win it.
Are those... Oh, no, my bad. For a second, I was like, are they all anteing up? Is that the business model? But no, of course, you'd sponsor that.
No. Yeah, eventually, without a doubt.
Right. Nice.
Yeah.
I like it. And what was your other biggie? Or did you want me to do my runners-up?
Yeah, the other biggie, if you read, I think it was the other week, Wi-Fi's security basically has a massive flaw. Basically, there's a protocol called WPA2, and it's essentially a handshake between the communication to keep everything secure. And it's ultimately part of like Wi-Fi's 802.11, if you've heard that or whatnot. And unfortunately, it has a massive flaw in it. What makes it even more challenging, the protocol is essentially, used by almost every manufacturer out there, but they implement it in different ways. So now everyone who uses Wi-Fi, any router and whatnot, from a corporation to a regular person, is at the mercy of these manufacturers to update it. But again, since they've all implemented it slightly differently, right? We're all at the mercy of them taking their time to patch it.
Yeah. I mean, we've been discussing security breaches for the last few episodes here, and I've reached a point where I just, like, I'm going to assume that everyone has my social security number. And, like...
Yeah, I mean, it's a joke. The social security number is as comical as, the modern check, right? You write a check to somebody, ACH, it's basically like, here's the keys to the castle. I'll just trust that you won't fucking use it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. We're essentially depending on goodwill, which, 99.99, who knows? It works out just fine, but that's not the part that we're saving against. So yeah, I don't worry about it anymore. I just, when it happens, I'll deal with it. That's kind of my take now. I do monitor my my credit rating like on a near weekly basis at this point, because what else are you gonna do? So, all right. So my big story. I had a few runners up. I really like this angle, by the way, of like, let's scan for the things that are gonna be disruptive. And yes, I'm painting it too big by the future of humanity or whatever. But our tech environment, if we think of the pond of technology and society, what rocks made some ripples this week? How about that? You like that better?
That's way better.
Nice. So
splice that into the front.
There are no edits. So the first one I considered was Amazon filed a patent for a drone that delivers a charge to power up electric vehicles. Conceivably while they're driving. I think it's all still an idea phase, but that's kind of the implication. The headline on TechCrunch includes the words "on the go."
So wait a minute, would it like drop a wire and fly with it while it's charging, or is it like physically dropping batteries?
I mean, this is the thing with big, companies like Amazon filing early, we own this patents, is all they really have to do is kind of, claim that they had the idea, draw up a schematic of how it would work, and they're just kind of sticking their fingers, some feelers out to get a little bit of the information. They essentially imagine that, you know how a Roomba finds its way back to the docking station?
Right.
It would be similar to that, where you are finding your way back to a little portal on the rooftop of the car that is, if you get there, then the connections can happen, and et cetera, et cetera. But again, super early. But it's interesting because the point that they make is like, people would be a little bit less concerned about whether they're going to have the range they need if they can always get on their phone and be like, beep, boop, boop, hook me up, right? There's a lot less fear of being stuck on the side of the road. In fact, suddenly you're less likely to run out of gas than you are with gas. So I thought that was interesting. The other one that I thought was a kind of my runner-up, Futurism.com talked about a U.S. political candidate who just pledged to make all decisions via an app poll.
Oh, I saw that one.
Yeah, right?
I almost included it.
Okay. We know that some weeks we're going to pick the same thing.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I think he wrote or said something to the effect of like, if like over 50% choose a given direction, that's what he's going with. And ultimately it would help prevent him using his own personal opinions and biases to make policy decisions. So.
Right. It's a weird, and these are the things we're interested in, right? Is where are we pushing the norm of what we've always done? On some level, you can argue, well, if you're just going to use your seat to do whatever the app says, why do we even need you? Why don't we just elect the app, right?
Yeah, I mean...
So you can collect a salary, I guess?
I think there's definitely flaws in it. That's one flaw, but obviously, like, security is another flaw, right? Like, what if I create a bot to vote for my district, right? And I just somehow, voted for everybody,
and
right?
That's why this wasn't my big story, is that, like, I don't think they've worked out how it's actually going to work. He's only running for city council. So he's going to be representing something in the tens of thousands. Their plan is for their staff to vet each individual and make sure that they're only hearing from actual registered voters and actual constituents of this particular guy, which,
Where was he?
Boulder, Colorado.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So, I mean, I think it's far off. Even if this particular guy gets elected, he's sort of a novelty in terms of not something that impacts everything right now. But, excuse me, potentially something that, like, if more people start thinking that way, and if we could ever actually figure out the security side of things, we could get, like, technology could take us to something closer to an actual democracy than the republic that we are. So, but my real choice, getting back to the, like, future of humanity and the destiny of our species argument, is what Wired ran about Google's learning software learns to write learning software. Yeah.
I think I might have read that one. Did it code better than people could write it?
Yeah, so they had a challenge of a couple of different tasks that an AI might be assigned. One of them is, if I'm looking at a picture, can I pull images out of that picture? Like, can I identify which things are objects inside of a picture? The other was essentially something in the world of, like, facial recognition. So tasks like that. And so essentially the humans took two approaches. One, they tried to solve the problem. And two, they wrote some software that is able to solve problems and told it to solve the initial problem. And the software was able to outperform the best human-built system by significant amounts. So, well, not like you know, knocking them out the block, but by several percentage points. So the clear and definitive winner kind of thing. And being that this is the first step, the first time that we're letting machines tell machines how to machine, it's like, if you talk about the singularity, right, and the concept of the runaway intelligence, where artificial is allowed to improve upon itself.
Well, didn't Facebook had a kind of a similar conundrum where didn't it create
it started building its own language? Yeah.
Right. Whoa! Stop that.
Right. Well, and that's the thing. You're starting to see a lot of calls from a lot of the big visionaries in technology that, okay, we're officially at that point. We're not there, but we're seeing technology that's starting to be in the world where we need to think about it a little bit more. So, stuff for us to pay attention to. Certainly we'll be watching that and its impact on the future of our species.
Welcome back. We are going to cover jurisprudence, where we dive into how quite often society can't keep up, or even is exceeding the pace at which laws can cover or not cover what's going on. A bunch of graffiti artists basically chose to start decorating part of one guy's building in the 1970s, and ultimately he obliged and didn't have a problem with it. And it basically became almost like a landmark for graffiti artists. They call it 5 Points with Z. And literally, not only would it become a landmark for graffiti artists, but also for people who appreciate art, and notably like street art. Now, what's interesting is that the building owner ultimately decided to, I believe, sell the building. Prior to selling the building, he, for some reason, had the 5 Points graffiti painted over. And that caused a little ruckus, because all the artists were like, wait a minute, that wasn't very nice. Like, you just eradicated our years of work, and you made this landmark go away, not only for people, but for us. So, the artists invoked a very largely unknown federal law called the Visual Artists' Rights Act, or VARA, and they're trying to use it to, and it was meant to protect public art that's of a recognized stature, right? So since it was like a landmark, not only for the artist, but also for people, like people would come there to see the art and whatnot, even though, right, that art was willingly property, right? Those graffiti artists do not own that property. And this, you know, this Five Points landmark was, it existed for over 20 years, attracted thousands of people and whatnot. Um, so it's interesting, right? Like the artists are trying to, basically say, hey, look, you're getting rid of something that was recognized art or like a landmark. Whereas the guy is like, well, no, like I worked hard for my life, and this is a building that I own, and no, like I don't need to give you notice that it's coming down.
Yeah. So, I mean, interesting. I almost always want to side with the scrappy group of artists, but if it's like, let's get permission from old man McGillicuddy, he said we can do it. Okay, great. But there's nothing in that, asking of permission that implies any kind of permanence, unless they somehow, you know, unless that was part of the ask, or I would.
Well, I mean, ultimately, like this Visual Artists' Rights Act, it really addressed these very situations. So,
Right, right. Yeah, I mean, I guess what it comes down to is they're recognizing a situation where something became larger than what it started out to be.
right,
Certainly.
and especially interesting, right? Especially interesting is that inherently graffiti up until I'd say recently was, some people think it's art, other people it's vandalism. So that this really could be precedent setting um,
In
accordingly.
terms of defining graffiti as a visual art.
Right.
Hmm. That seems obvious. It's painting.
Yeah, but I mean, not all. I would say not all graffiti is art.
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, I get the point that, like, yeah, it's also vandalism. Um, but if you have permission, then it's not vandalism. They had permission, therefore it's painting. Right?
Well, I don't think permission um, defines whether or not it's art.
It defines whether or not it's vandalism.
Sure, but not art versus not art.
Yeah. So that's interesting. Do you have any idea how long this book has been on this law has been on the books, or is it like, is it just obscure, or is it new?
It's to my knowledge, it's not new. I don't know how long it's existed, but
Mm.
these resourceful artists definitely dug it up and trying to ultimately use it to save the work.
Huh. So this is an ongoing case. They may or may
Yeah.
not. Okay. So let's say they win. What precedent does that establish? It's essentially the fact that, like, by virtue of painting his own, of allowing the art to happen and allowing the property that he owned to achieve monument status, is maybe not right, but a level of community importance.
Mhm. Yeah,
Essentially,
they call it recognized stature.
okay. So, in allowing his property to reach this recognized stature, he essentially lost his ownership of the property?
No,
Well,
he doesn't lose ownership of it. He then becomes required to give them notice, um,
okay.
like a 90-day notice, that it's slated to come down. And to me, that implies that that 90-day window would give them an opportunity to preserve it or do something.
Yeah, but how do you preserve graffiti? You got to move the wall.
Well,
Right?
you could photograph it. You photograph it, cut the wall off, repair
and
the
so
wall.
the
You know what I mean?
problem is, dude just showed up with a roller brush.
Yeah, like he hired people to whitewash, like paint fucking over it.
Gotcha. All right. Well, we'll have to pay attention and let people know how this turns out. Add another court case to our list of stories we're following. Time for segment 3, and as part of our reformatting, we decided that we were doing segment 4, let's dig some more all the time. We always kept coming back to climate change stories. It was like the thing that every week there was always something. It gave birth to its own little mini segment called Darren's Omnibus Offering of Mother Earth. Oh, wait. Darren's official omnibus offering of Mother Earth dispatches. I almost forgot an O, and that would take it from doomed to doomed.
Oh, you had one.
Yeah, so it's critical that you maximum impact. Anyway, it essentially became its own thing, and so as we're reworking the format, we're gonna let it be its own thing. And segment 3 is going to be doomed pretty often. And if you aren't interested in continuously hearing about how clams are releasing more carbon dioxide into the air than cow farts, then you can just skip segment 3 and move on to segment 4, which is where the rest of Dig Some More will reside. As far as this week, we're going to keep it pretty tight on the doomed segments. Yes, there's the standard number of things going on, but it was a sort of a slow news week in We're All Gonna Die news. But I like to start with the headline review of things that are scary just on their own, just from hearing them. CNN has a report that the EPA makes, quote, climate change vanish from its 4-year plan. So they're just not using that word. Why? I assume you're laughing because it's too painful to cry. I mean, like, it is kind of in, like, I don't even, words escape, right? Like, okay, that's what you believe, but you have to believe it so hard that you're just not able to use the words. You're not able to acknowledge, and I don't even want to call it the other side, right? You won't acknowledge the mainstream perception. So that the Environmental Protection Agency, the agency charged with protecting the environment, will not use the phrase climate change. Not that they won't, but that they don't in their 4-year plan. So that's exciting. National Geographic had the headline that a hole the size of Maine has opened in the Antarctica ice. There was another one similar to it in the 1970s. This is maybe more of a kind of cycles kind of thing. What's scary about it, though, is that once you have a hole in the ice, it's harder for ice to layer up on top of that. So it's another one of those negative feedback, reinforcing feedback kinds of things. So we can be nice and scared about that. Science Daily reporting Harvey runoff menaces Texas's coral reefs. So the idea here is all that rain slammed into Texas, and now as it slowly goes down, it feeds into the rivers, which feed into the oceans. So you suddenly have a massive amount of fresh water entering that system. Not unlike, by the way, the same thing that is a headline this week, that there's a huge amount of fresh water runoff coming from Greenland. So all that ice melting is generating more fresh water. That all comes out into the area, right off the coast, which is in the case of this Texas story, where Texas's coral reefs live. A lot of organisms are very sensitive to the degree of salinity, and if you suddenly tweak it by 10%, which is what something like a hurricane does, boom.
Mm.
Now, again, natural cycles, hurricanes happen. This kind of thing, certainly, not the only time it's happened, but when we are theoretically seeing storms a lot bigger than they ought to be, when we're seeing cities like Houston that don't enforce infrastructure in the way that could help mitigate some of these concerns, you wind up with big effects. And I mean, heck, we got plenty of coral reefs, right? No big deal. Also, Science Daily headline, tropical beetles face extinction threats. Your standard we're all going to die stuff. Scientific American reporting, Trump picks weather company chief to lead climate agency. So you dig a little bit into this. Scientific American was trying to stay fairly journalistic about it. Other media sources chose to focus on the fact that the guy being chose to lead the climate agency doesn't even have a science degree. He's essentially a lawyer. I mean, he has an education, but not necessarily one that applies to this. What he has is a background in private sector weather. And, he's somebody who doesn't necessarily believe that weather data should be public. So once again, we have a Trump appointee, right? Like, how many things can he, it must be hard to go find the person who opposes the very nature of that thing that you're putting that person in charge of. But he's doing it. So the story that I wanted to dig into a little bit is a cool breakthrough in desalinization. Now, desalinization, how does it apply to climate change? Essentially, if you think of ocean levels rising, maybe the easiest example is Florida. Florida has very porous soil and rock underneath a lot of its cities. What happens is that the freshwater aquifers, as the ocean level rises, essentially, it's not just rising up the coast, it's rising underneath in the porous water. And so you get more salt water mixed in with the fresh water that's supposed to supply, say, something for people to drink. So as that happens more and more, we can expect drinking water to become more and more of an issue. The cool breakthrough that was being reported, this one is out of the University of Illinois. And what they've essentially done is to take a technology similar to how a battery works and to apply that to salt water. Batteries, to give the really quick description, they work by forcing or taking advantage of the natural inclination of ions to slip back and forth across the membrane. What they were doing here is taking electrodes and putting it into the salt water, and they found that by using the right kind of electrodes and the right chemicals in the mix with the water, they could pull the ions out, and not just sodium chloride, but all the other different salts. Essentially, they're separating out the positive ions and leaving water behind. So it's kind of a...
So are they? I know people have tried that before with electricity like that, but I guess more efficient, or it's using less electricity.
Part of the key is the fact that, yes, it's overall more efficient. Essentially, it becomes more economically feasible to even be able to do it this way. And it has to do with, I don't know if it would be proper to call it, I don't have the actual chemical equation in front of me, so I'm not sure it would be appropriate to call it a catalyst. But they're using a chemical analog to, it's not thymol blue. Anyway, it comes down to the chemical that they've introduced into the equation, and it's doing a better and more efficient job. Prussian blue, the compound Prussian blue, it's not Prussian blue they're using. It's something that has the same kind of chemical active points, and when they put that in the mix, it allows them to take out the potassium, the calcium, the manganese, the magnesium, in a way that has been, significant improvement on the previous efforts. So here's hoping.
Nice.
Which is probably enough to fulfill my final requirement, which is an optimistic out. But I will also point to something that Futurism.com was reporting, which is that Toyota trucks that emit only water vapor are now moving goods in Los Angeles. So this is fuel cell technology, and Toyota has applied it all the way up to the level of semi-trucks or equivalent in order to do shipping. Kind of like the story you talked about last week with autonomous train. Here we've got a breakthrough again in freight, but this time it's a much more efficient way to go with in terms of greenhouse gases. So anyway, that's the first time that Doomed exists as its own segment, and I'm going to kind of try and keep that format that we run through some of the headlines, call out the ones that are interesting, maybe dig into one featured story, and then hopefully, most weeks I can find one with some digging. We end on a headline that's optimistic, that, runs counter to the title of the segment, makes us think perhaps we are not, in fact, all going to destroy ourselves within our lifetimes. Fingers crossed.
Let's dig some more, where we revisit new developments and things that we've already talked about on prior episodes. In the past, we've definitely covered self-driving, the implications of it across all aspects of it, ranging from, people won't need garages, to less deaths, to more efficiency and whatnot, and even the laws around it. Most recently, California put out new self-driving laws around testing, whereas previously they required these manufacturers to have at least a human in the driver's seat. Should anything go wrong, they could easily grab the wheel or do other things to mitigate a situation. But this is kind of precedent setting in the sense that they're basically saying, look, in California, we're going to permit self-driving tests without a human driver in the driver's seat.
I mean, they've been testing with a backup human for a while. There's been the occasional death, but certainly not as many as happened by humans. It'd be interesting to see a per capita comparison on that. But the bottom line is we know the machines are performing better.
Yeah, and ultimately the companies that are involved in kind of making this happen range from Waymo, which is part of Google's self-driving unit, Alphabet, Tesla, Ford, GM, Apple, among others. There were meetings dating back to April to really, make this happen. So don't be surprised if you see an empty driver's seat.
Yeah, well, and I shared before my experience of coming across a test vehicle, where I noticed it as I was walking through a crosswalk with my family, and had sort of an instinctive "kids get behind me" reaction to the words, self-driving test. Now there was definitely a dude behind the wheel. So but it was sort of, as it came around, you could see on the hood that it was testing, and it's going to be a different thing altogether the first time I see a car come at me with no driver. Nice. What else we got?
I mean, what's interesting also is that Ford basically took a vehicle. They disguised someone who was literally almost like a Halloween costume he was disguised as the seat. So he could see. He was effectively to a pedestrian outside of the vehicle. It would appear as if there's no one in the driver's seat.
I've seen prank videos that do the same thing.
Yeah, but Ford did it to really understand, like, how would people react to not seeing a human driver in the driver's seat.
Did they get any data on, I don't know what you're testing, how many people gasp and fleek and shriek, shriek and flee?
I don't recall exactly, but I know that the vehicle, they tested different lighting schemes depending on what the vehicle was about to do. So whether it's about to accelerate, whether it's about to turn, whether it's about to stop, not having an apparent driver in the driver's seat.
Gotcha. Okay. Nice.
Yeah.
You know, inevitable.
Indeed. Now, we've also talked about in the past synthetic foods, so growing meat in labs, different kinds of meat that's not meat, maybe plant-based, whatnot, right? There's all to, hunger, to health and whatnot.
Right.
Ultimately, what if people created synthetic human flesh? Right? And what if they ate it?
Rad.
Oh. It's like, is that cannibalism? What is that? Right? Like, I don't even know what you call it.
Right. Well, so I mean, okay. So what's fascinating about that is that goes straight to the heart of the lab meat question, right? So, are you eating pig when you eat lab pig? Well, you're eating pig cells. So, if we instead switch it to human flesh, you're not eating human because a human didn't die.
Right.
In the same way that you didn't kill a pig. But you are consuming human cells. Now, did this come up for some reason? Is it like, I could see, for example, maybe it's most nutritious for humans to eat humans because the proteins are closest to human proteins and, your body can easily digest them and turn them into, human, right? Is there something like that behind it? Or is it just kind of like part of the philosophical conversation of where we're going?
Not sure I could really answer that, but my guess would be it's more about, like, look, the technology exists, and I'm sure people are likely to go down this road. So then it's like, well, how are we classifying this?
Yeah. It seems like one of those edgy things that some idiots will try just to be the guys who did that,
That won't be me. Let's put it that way.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I'm personally happy to go out to the barn and kill a pig myself. Like, I can stick with the old school ways and all of that. Or I'm also perfectly happy not eating meat. Also, fully acceptable way to go. I have in my life lived by both of those philosophies at different stages, and all good. So no part of me needs to question whether or not I would be tempted to eat human meat. I don't need to know whether or not that qualifies as cannibalism, because not going to happen. I hear you. What else we got in the dig some more pile?
Yeah, so going back to transportation, we've talked a lot about autonomous vehicles and whatnot, autonomous trains, but Dubai, especially their police department, they're notorious for having, like, Lamborghinis and these crazy vehicles, kind of police fleet. Now, in Dubai, we also covered episodes ago that these are becoming more and more reality, where you can literally just, almost in a drone type manner, just summon a drone or a mini copter and off you go. Now, this is more along the lines of like imagine like a hover bike. So something that looks like almost like a motorcycle with almost fans on it. And it would ultimately little autonomous robocops. And it's just another way that their law enforcement could and against any criminal activity.
But we're talking about human riders, right? Because aren't they also implementing robot cops? I thought and by the way, way to go, United Arab Emirates, for like, what are we going to be known for? Like giant ass luxury buildings in the middle of the desert and robot flying cars, like.
In this case, like it would be like the cops hopping on these motorcycle-like
Okay.
hover bikes. So
Nice.
Yep.
I like it. I'm a little jealous that it's happening there and not here.
Well, maybe we can buy some.
I will go out and discover oil in my backyard, become oil rich like the nation of the United Arab Emirates, and then I'll see if I can get us a couple.
Now, the last story I want to dig into, I know we've talked ad nauseum about administration, their downfalls, and also the links to Russian manipulation of the election. First thing is that we've talked about Facebook's issues surfaced. Twitter is revealing ads bought by Russian people, but now allegedly there's links to Russian influence using Pokemon Go, of all things, right? Like that game exploded and then kind of somewhat died, but it's still alive. But supposedly, you as part of the game, you had to physically go places to get these Pokemon balls and all these other things. So they set up and leveraged the game to have people go and effectively troll where like Black Lives Matter incidents happened, particularly where people were shot. So basically putting people in controversial places in order to raise racial tensions and bring up these issues and incidents around police brutality, again, to be try and divide the nation even more so.
Wait, so were they simply trying to make a lot of people show up in certain places and therefore kind of manipulated the appearance of the number of citizens supporting this or that? But they were actually there trying to get Charizard kind of thing?
So I don't think it was to make it appear that people are supporting or not. But fact of the matter is, right, like spots where unfortunate incidents with civilians being killed by police, right? Like those places, people have put memorials, people visit constantly. So if all of a sudden you see all these people effectively, running or almost like flash mobbing to these areas, right? You don't know why they're there. Oh, well, maybe there's another memorial going on. You know what I mean? So I think that was the ultimate intention, right? Like given that the game is, geolocation based, so they put, I forgot what the picture is, but you could put these whatevers in the game in certain areas so that have to go there.
Weird. Huh. Well, I guess next week we'll be doing Dig Some More on, it turns out the Russians have infiltrated your refrigerator, and because of that, Hillary lost. We've got this ongoing FBI investigation, right? And then meanwhile, it's just a little bit at a time. Oh, by the way, this happened, and each time it's more intrusive and more pervasive, and yet there's nothing definitive. There's just this sort of like, oh, they might have done this, they might have done that. Like, it's time for some catharsis and some answers, and like, if we are a country at all anymore, we need to, and I'm perfectly willing to hear, oh yeah, the Russians tried, they weren't successful because we have security. Donald Trump actually won because his team made the right strategic plays in the right states. There's your answer. Done. Like, tell me that. Okay, fine. But like, fucking Russia was using fucking Pokemon to manipulate our perception of our society. Enough. And I end yet another segment on an exasperated sigh. Segment 5 time, and as part of our restructuring of our format, we decided that we wanted to end each episode with something that kind of fits in the world of like either opinion, not that we don't share opinions on all our stories as we go, or a game or that kind of thing. Places where you can get a little bit more of what we think on stuff. We've been doing this 3 headlines and a lie, what we're going to call the fake news game, for a couple of episodes, but I've just been dominating that game so entirely that it's hard to try to do another episode. It's like running up the scoreboard at this point. So instead of visiting that, a lot of times this 5th segment is going to be occupied by the fake news game. I think that's going to kind of be our standard. But on weeks where we have something else that might be fun, we'll put that in here. And this time, that's what we have. This is a segment we call Always in Motion is the Future. And the way we play this is we take a look at some article out there that has made predictions about the future, and we try to assess what we think the likelihood is that the predictions are correct. So today, I have a write-up from digitaltrends.com. The title is 6 Ways Humankind Might Accidentally Bring About the Techpocalypse. That's a hard word to say. Techpocalypse. And so we're going to read through these. I purposely didn't read anything more than the headline. So we're going to do this live. Eric hasn't heard any of this. So we're going to go through each of these 6 things, and we're going to assign our percentage likelihood that we think that this kind of techpocalypse could happen. I'm getting better at saying techpocalypse. The key is to keep your mouth kind of gritted out. Techpocalypse. Okay. So, possibility number 1. Super intelligent AI takes over. This is the sort of, Terminator style, or, any of 100 movies. Basically, any sci-fi that involves somebody making amazing breakthroughs in artificial intelligence. If it isn't from Japan, it will end with humanity being subjugated to those robots. So we talked about this earlier, right? We've got machines that are improving upon machines. In a couple episodes ago, we talked about how robotic muscles are going to work out the physics on what we've invented for them so that they can be about 3 times stronger than humans. Basically, the machines that we're inventing to replace us are going to be better than us in every way. What are the odds that we lose track of this and machines improving upon themselves do so at an ever-increasing pace, and it just reaches escape velocity. Eric, what do you think the percentage is that the foreseeable end of humanity is at the hands of our own creation?
75%.
75%. Jesus, I'm scared. Wow. So you think that it's 3 chances in 4 that humans won't manage to get a rein on this, that we're just going to like destroy ourselves or allow ourselves to be destroyed by our own creation?
Yes.
Wow. Okay, so I hear ya. It seems like on some level inevitable, right? The thing is, like, we're going to advance. Whether it happens next year or 100 years from now, it doesn't matter. We're going to have technology advance to the point that we've created something that is smarter, faster, and stronger than us. And depending on what we do with learning, they could very well, exponentially grow past anything we're capable of doing with our silly old biological reproduction techniques. I think, though, that one of two things will happen. Either we will build in the ability to ratchet that shit back because we can't handle not being the inferior, can't handle not being at the top of any food chain, including, from the last segment, what if the robots start feeding us people cells? Anyway, so I think either that, or I think more likely the singularity happens, and yes, this rampant growth goes exponential, but we're part of it. So I think we merge with machines, as scary as that is, and yes, they get smarter and smarter and smarter, but we're on the same page. That's what I'm hoping.
Interesting.
All right, item number 2. Oh, so my percentage, I'm going to say there's only like a 3% chance that super intelligent AI takes over. Happens.
Too low.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to be optimistic on it. Look, I have an entire segment dedicated to the destruction of humanity at humanity's own hands. Every single week we do one of these. The odds are really good that we will have destroyed humanity ourselves before the robots get to do it. All right, number 2. Transforming the world into gray goo. Huh? All right, they're talking about nanotechnology. This was the TV show Stargate had something along this theory. So it's similar to the previous one, except that it's nanotech that's self-replicating. And if you let it get to that place where it's able to kind of do its own thing and it's able to make more of its own self, then essentially it goes along, it needs to eat, right? So we've created these little replicating nanobots. They're supposed to make more of themselves as part of their programming. And that gets exponential because you made 2 little replicators, and the 2 little replicators, and then they make 2 friends, and then they make 2 friends, and then they make 2 friends until they have essentially slowly eaten everything. And it happens in so referring back to this, so it was first proposed by nanotechnology expert Kim Eric Drexler in Engines of Creation. A replicator floating in a bottle of chemicals making copies of itself. The first replicator assembles a copy in 1,000 seconds. The 2 replicators then build more in the next 1,000 seconds. 4 build another 4, and so on. At the end of 10 hours, if this is true, that is 1,000 seconds to replicate, You have 68 billion replicators, and in less than a day,
Jesus.
you would have a ton of replicators. In less than 2 days, they would outweigh the Earth. So, given that idea, what do you think the percentages are that we turn the entire world into goo as it gets digested by replicators? I'm going to go low
I
again.
want to go with. No, I'm gonna go with the 75 again.
Wow. Dismal future you paint us. I'm going low again because again, like, if you're building this shit, put a lid on it. Keep it in a bottle. Have something in there that says there can only ever be 21 billion replicators or whatever it takes, We put a cap on Bitcoin. We could put a cap on self-building robots. All right, number 3, depleting our planet's natural resources. So we don't manage to get renewable energy to happen. We don't manage to colonize other planets. And meanwhile, the human population continues to grow and grow and grow. What do you think the odds are that we just don't have enough minerals, don't have enough food, and we all die that way?
To mix it up a bit, I'll go 65.
Wow. So more likely that we die at the hands of the robots. I kind of agree with you. That said, this is another one where I think as much as I'm continuously talking about all the things that we're doing, I do think we have a knack for teching our way out of things. So I'm going 10%. I think we are going to destroy, almost to the point of irreparability, the fishes in the ocean. I think we could definitely, we are certainly on track for mass extinctions. So those animals that don't serve us don't have much of a chance at current rates. I think we're also very likely to reach a point where the entire planet is uncomfortable to humans most of the time, or certainly in the summer months, if the science is to be believed. But again, I do think, I'm still going low with my 10% because I do think we might find carbon sinks, or hell, we'll let the robots figure out how to fix it for us. Number 4 is massive cyber attack. So the idea being that it goes a little bit further than what we're seeing, possible just like voting and claiming information, and it gets all the way to a cyber attack where people's water treatment plants get polluted, power gets turned off, travel gets shut down. Essentially, all of U.S. infrastructure is gone with the flip of a switch from an attack of a foreign power, and then suddenly we're looting and pillaging and chaos everywhere.
Nice. I'll give that one 45.
45. So that means that so far out of all of these, you think that's the least likely to happen.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go 35. I think this is the most likely of all of them to happen so far. I don't know what's left on this terror list. I do think it'll happen. I think we'll shut it. I think we'll get on top of it, right? You read stories about how dams everywhere are in terrible, there's a lot of security risks at key infrastructure of utilities and whatnot. Like, I think they could bring down power grids. I think we might go weeks or months without power in regions. But, like, you know, Texas is its own grid, and Elon Musk is attempting to bring power back to Puerto Rico with battery systems, and Google is flying internet balloons over Puerto Rico, you know? So, like, we're close to the point if Plan A gets crushed, Plan B will get enough of us back to speed so that we can get everybody else back to speed. So I do think something like that is inevitable unless we stop letting politicians be in charge of technology and we start asking actual technologists how to do stuff like that. So I think it's the most likely, but I also think it's the least consequential. Put it that way.
Interesting.
Number 5, experimental technology goes wrong. So this one's whatever. I'm just going to read it before we comment on it. The Large Hadron Collider, the relativistic heavy ion collider. You know, it's the argument of like, hey, what if you guys are looking for teeny tiny particles and you accidentally open a black hole or something like that, as you're attempting to learn the secrets of all these different particles. What do you think the odds are that we just basically, as sci-fi would say, tear a hole in the fabric of space-time?
I'll give that one 25.
What is wrong with you? You're just convinced that humans are going to die. Die. I think
Everyone does.
This is so... well, yes, but not en masse. Like, if you told me, you know, an asteroid, okay, fitty. Maybe not this year, right? Or a volcano releases so much ash into the air that, you know, like, in fact, there's the stories this week about...
Yellowstone.
Yeah, exactly. The Yellowstone supervolcano they are now thinking it's much higher chance of it happening much sooner than they thought. It's still on geological scale, so how do you pay attention to that? Anyway, experimental technology goes wrong is so infinitesimally small, I'm not even going to acknowledge it. I call it near zero. It is a non-starter. Unless no, I'm not even going to dignify. All right, and then finally, we go to war using high-tech weapons. So basically, we're talking nuclear or something even worse, basically.
I'll give that 33.
33?
Yep.
This is really tough to respond to. To me, it's like, you know, Sting summed it up in If the Russians Love Their Children Too. Nobody wants that level of devastation because and we've got the stockpiles, and you know that if you ever use it, then you're dead. You have to be in such a severe situation that you want the other person dead so badly that you're perfectly willing to destroy your own civilization too. And like, even the little man boys who are waving their dicks at each other right now have to understand that like if you're Kim Jong-un, I mean, yes, you're bathing in a steady stream of your own propaganda. Sure. You are surrounded by people who constantly tell you you're great.
Dennis Rodman.
Sure. And I guess all of the things that I just said apply on our side too, from what it appears. However, I think there's two theories here, right? Either Trump is a ridiculously amazing con man who is like doesn't give a shit about anything. He has played every game there is to play. He was born with a silver spoon. He has won everything. He has grabbed whatever he wanted to grab. He has, become a reality television star. So, like, he's exploited every avenue of fame. And being president was just, like, another thing that could possibly entertain him. And so why not? And consequences be damned. Like, I mean, we're talking sociopathic, psychopathic. I don't care about anybody, and my own amusement is what's there. Like, it's either that, or dude is like mentally ill. Did you see that there was actually a march of psychologists who?
Yes.
Yeah. Like, how nuts is that a seated president has psychologists who basically, by their own professional standards, are not allowed to diagnose someone from a distance, are nonetheless saying, okay, that's it, fuck this. There's so much evidence that he's, clearly suffering from narcissistic whatchamacallit disorder. He won't let anything go. They come to the conclusion that, like, we have to act. Now, there was only like 150 people represented, but all of those people were psychologists, so that's kind of a niche. Who organized this march. I'm getting off topic here, but the point of the story is either Trump is mentally ill, in which case, okay, we're actually at some level of doomsday clock here, or he's playing a ridiculous game, has some idea of what's going on. And if that's true, if he is in any way salient, then he understands that, like, if you push the red button, we all die. He might, it may be that in his brain, this is worth doing because, gosh, the Obama administration was a bunch of wusses, and look at me push the button. Nobody pushes the button like I can. There's definitely, believe me, I am a great button pusher. I have read a lot about pushing buttons, and that is not inconsistent with what we've seen. So I feel like I talked for a long time. All of which was to say, I don't know, fitty. the odds of ending in nuclear war. But if we can get out of this administration, then I think it drops to like 1%. Now, the odds of a nuclear bomb going off, I think, is closer to like 80%. Because, it's Chekhov with an axe above the fireplace. Like, we have just a bunch of nuclear weapons and we have a bunch of people pissed off at each other. Somebody's going to think it's justified to drive a truck into a building and nuke it, that part seems inevitable, but I still think even in that situation, cooler heads prevail, and we don't see a retaliation.
We shall see.
Yeah. Okay, so ending the story on a super chipper note. Although I guess by choosing the techpocalypse as our story. So to recap, what did you think was the most likely of all those? Do you remember? I think it was you started at 75 for the AR.
Yeah, two of the early ones were 75.
And the world transforming into gray goo. Those were your highest. I said that the cyber attack is probably the most likely but the least consequential. And I think that was my highest rating. So we'll see. We between us, we picked half of them as the way that things could go bad. Won't we be embarrassed if a nuclear war breaks out? If that happens, you'll have an official Diginauts apology. You just won't be able to do anything with it. So that brings an end to another stunning episode of the Diginauts. Woohoo! Let us know what you think of the new format. I like it. And at the end of the day, who are we making this for but ourselves, right? So let us know what you think, though. We certainly welcome suggestions. Do you like the way that we approach the opening, retooling it a little bit to be sort of more significant stories rather than top stories? It's a fine distinction, but I get it. Do you like the idea of ending each episode in a game, even if it makes us just basically giggle through this outro? Was it a good idea to split Doomed out? Are you sick of Doomed? I could be sick of Doomed. Let us know. You can come to goodtalknetwork.com and find all sorts of ways of reaching us, including phone number, including email, including comments per episode. Also, the easiest way to reach us with short stuff is via Twitter, where I am at Digital Darren.
And I'm at eFader.
And together we are at Good Talk Network. So any of those places, we just gave you like 19 ways to get in touch with us. So do it, why don't you? What else do I need to say?
That's it.
All right. Good talk.